own nerves, and that's how Guillain-Barré syndrome comes about.
Is it okay to have a little breakdown? She said to the doctors, "What can I do to save my life?" And they said, "We're doing everything we can. We're going to put a hole in your lung, and then that'll be all we can do." And she said, "Oh, I'll go there." She said, "I'm tougher than that." And she was.
I was something in my teeth, and they went on like this for like 15 minutes, and they're your friends? They're my friends. Yeah. I was born Patricia Suzanne Jennings, and I was named after my brother's first love, Suzanne. He was 6, and he was in love with this little girl, and so he named me Suzanne. My first name, Patricia, comes after my mother's brother, who died at 21 from a brain injury. We lived in a, middle-class neighborhood. You didn't worry about really locking your door. It was really typical. And I met John.
John and I worked together. He came on board at the hotel I was managing as the director of sales. After John had been with us for a couple of years, Suzanne came into the picture.
In 2001, right after 9/11, I was transferred from Vancouver to Calgary. So many of my friends were being let go. John and I were at a trade show a short time after, and our booths were side by side. And the usual questions, how are you? And then it became, oh, I was separated, and oh, I was separated.
And that sort of progressed into, we got married only a couple of years later.
After they got married, Suzanne came on board with our management company, so not only was she part of John's family, but she became part of our family.
The symptoms that people get are usually weakness. It tends to start down low, so around the feet, and gradually work its way up the body and then affect the arms and hands. As it becomes more severe, it can also affect other muscles such as the breathing muscles, but oftentimes there's no obvious cause for it, and the body just mounts this autoimmune response for reasons that we don't fully understand.
I know Suzanne, and I've known Suzanne since probably the early 90s. We met through the hospitality industry. We both worked for hotels and did that for many years, and met each other at hotel functions and trade shows and conferences and conventions.
Well, John had been changing jobs, and he had just moved and just got back from the first holiday they'd had in a long time, and ended up 3 days later, after they came home from Mexico, they ended up in the emergency ward. And it was awful.
I was in shock. I was a little speechless. I had no idea how to deal with the situation. I had no idea what to say.
I was always busy. I was always active. I was a cheerleader in junior high. I was on the track team. Lots of friends. I had a great career. I was busy, energetic, traveled a great deal. And then I got sick, and it all changed. It was really frightening because I woke up one morning, just my left cheek was numb and tingling, and I initially thought I had slept wrong. And then the next day was the left arm. Start thinking, maybe I have a stroke, maybe I'm having a stroke. And then I couldn't even hold anything in my left hand. Went to my doctor, and he sent me home. He said, "You're fine, just go home and relax."
By the Monday morning, it became obvious that she was in serious trouble. Suzanne phoned her doctor and said, "I can't move anything now." And he said, "Get John to send you to take you to the hospital right away." And at St. Paul's Hospital, I drove into the emergency entrance, which is really where the ambulances were supposed to park. And I pulled up there, and we got out of the car, and Suzanne said, "I need a smoke," because, you know, we really didn't know if she was going to live again or live longer. We didn't know what it was.
When I was first admitted into St. Paul's Hospital, so this was my first day, and I was getting settled in my room. Where I first felt anger was when a nurse said to me, "I hope you said goodbye to your husband." And I said, barely able to speak, barely able to hear. I said, "What?" 3 times she had to repeat it. Finally I said, "What do you mean did I say goodbye to my husband?" And she said, "Because he won't be back. Husbands don't come back. They leave. They can't handle it. When a man gets sick, the women stay. So your husband probably won't be back." I was angry. I was angry that she took that hope away from me, but now I realize she was probably just letting me know of what may lay ahead.
I'm not generally an angry person, but there were times when I had tremendous amounts of anger. There are a lot of wonderful people in the hospital system here, but sometimes the way that Suzanne was treated, I was angry because I was helpless. I could sit there, I could gnash my teeth, whatever, but I was totally helpless. I wanted to lash out. I never felt any anger towards Suzanne. I didn't even feel pity. It was because she's such a strong person. It was wonderful the way she bucked up, and I believe that, in fact I know now, that she spent much of her time trying to make me feel better.
My husband used to refer to me as his bride. After March 31st, 2008, when I entered the hospital, he then referred to me as Suzanne, my wife. I was no longer his bride. He became my caregiver, not my lover.
One of the devastating aspects of Guillain-Barré syndrome is really the emotional or the psychosocial part. If you imagine yourself one day completely healthy, able to run, do sports, interact, do your job, and then over the course of days, literally lose your independence, lose your function. So that is psychologically can be quite devastating. I think it's as important for the physicians, nurses, and all of the allied healthcare workers to recognize that and address that with our patients.
I think the thing that struck me the most about Suzanne was that she had been a completely independent woman who was very used to being in control of her life. She was used to being in control of not only her own personal life, but also was used to being in charge in her work situation. And all of a sudden this illness had taken away all her independence. She became paralyzed. She was completely dependent on the staff that were caring for her in the hospital. Her dignity was taken away from her, because when you're in that situation in the hospital, you do have to depend on the staff that are caring for you, and you really don't have very much control. Suzanne always tried to retain control, but I know that was very hard for her emotionally, not to have that control that she was used to having.
Suzanne's such a vital person. There's so much vitality, so much enthusiasm, and she's just always in the conversation and has a great sense of the moment. And for that to have been withdrawn from her, that was just taken away. It not only seemed so unfair, but it just meant that the individual that you saw next wasn't where she used to be.
She had lost her muscle strength, and now she had to be able to try and regain her muscle strength and also be able to move herself around, and so that was more difficult for her. But we were able to work through that. As she regained her strength in the rehabilitation process, she was able to overcome these difficulties, and she actually did very well.
You know, I wanted to die many times, I'll be honest. I think it's a natural reaction. I'm a Christian, and along the way I definitely found my Christianity, my faith. It kept me going. You don't take life for granted. It's a gift. Life is just a great gift. And I didn't feel it was fair for me to want to die when so many people were trying to make me live.
When I first heard about Suzanne, I think my heart stopped. And it's one of those things that nobody deserves to have happen to them. And when you think about how vibrant Suzanne is and what a wonderful person she is, the first thing I heard was that she was paralyzed, which was heartbreaking.
She had a tough recovery, whatever. At one point it was very grim. She said to the doctors, "What can I do to save my life?" And they said, "We're doing everything we can. We're going to put a hose in your lung, and then that'll be all we can do." And she said, "No, I'm not going there." She said, "I'm tougher than that." And she was. She was turned down by G.F. Strong. She was turned down by them. They said, "You're too far gone for us." And I don't know how she did it, but she rattled enough chains and she got in there. And so it's been pretty bad, but it sure looks a lot better now.
It went so swiftly from, you know, a kind of almost an arthritic situation is what everybody thought, to, you know, she ended up in the hospital on her back. She couldn't walk.
The biggest challenge for Mrs. Jennings was really the form of Guillain-Barré syndrome. Usually the attack is just on the insulation of the nerve, and our bodies are much more capable of healing that type of attack. We can rebuild the insulation. In Mrs. Jennings' case, the attack also included the attack on the actual axon, or the copper wire of the electrical wire, if you think of a nerve in that way. Our bodies are much less capable of healing axonal damage, so she had a very severe case of GBS.
When we came to this facility, we're at G.F. Strong Rehabilitation Hospital right now. When we came here, Suzanne was recommended to come here by the doctor from this facility. And on the intake day, she was told by her nurse, intake nurse, that she shouldn't be here. That she was going to be too much. She was still paralyzed, of course, and she was going to be too much work, and it was going to be very difficult for her. So Suzanne just started crying, and I did too, to be honest with you. And she said if she could have moved, she was paralyzed, she would have jumped out the window, but of course that's the way it worked out, is that she couldn't move.
Having Guillain-Barré syndrome, the early onset, when your body starts to shut down, it's terrifying because you're lucid, you're aware, but you can't move your hands, you can't move. I couldn't wipe away the tears that were falling down my face. I couldn't do this. I couldn't vocalize necessarily what I needed or wanted. My family didn't know how to respond to me. It was like being a prisoner of war, I guess, in that I was a prisoner in my body. I knew what I wanted to say or what I wanted to do, but the rest of me couldn't do it.
Based on how severe her Guillain-Barré syndrome was and how little strength she had, I thought it was highly likely that she'd be left with severe and prolonged disability. I believe I probably told her that it was unlikely she'd be able to walk again.
I tried always to hide my own self-fears and self-doubts because I had plenty of them. Would I be able to last? Would I be able to be the husband in the future that she needed? If she didn't recover, if she stayed in the wheelchair forever, which would have been entirely possible, they said she would never walk again, would I truly be able to continue to be that person that would be fun for her, that she would enjoy being with? And there were times when I just simply turned and walked away, because I knew that I might say something that would be hurtful.
I bet you there were days where I felt I wish I didn't have anyone around me, because when people came to visit me, you kind of had to feel like you were on, right? People were coming to see you, so you felt like you had to be on. And especially with my husband, he was dealing with his own pain, probably depression about all this. How could you not? And I'm sure there were more than one day where I just felt that he just didn't come back. But I was so happy when I would see him come back through the door the next day, or that night, bringing me Chinese food or my favorite foods, and it would just brighten up my day. When I meet someone that has GBS, usually we all sort of say the same thing. I guess it's like being an AA or one of those, what'd you have? And, did you have a ventilator? Were you in ICU? Did you have tingle on your left side? What are your areas that you have left to improve? We all seem to say the same things. They have that common bond. What have I learned? I've learned many things along my journey of recovery. I've learned that life is a gift. It really is. I've learned to not take myself so seriously. A career is something that we plan on. Being ill is something that happens. And how you deal with that, and your friends and your family and your whole community. I was really fortunate that I had a really great support system, and I don't take them for granted.
The hope always was that there'd be recovery, and as that became more noticeable that there was actually going to be recovery, and then seeing at one point Suzanne in public, it was quite heartening.
I think when you see somebody go through something like this, you realize that life is on a string, that people aren't invincible. So this has been a real wake-up call for all of Suzanne's friends and all of her family, and never mind for Suzanne and John. And I mean, John's been just tremendously supportive, as I'm sure you've heard. I mean, it's just, he was there every single moment. There's this whole Guillain-Barré organization out there that rally around. I mean, you have no idea these things exist until you get thrown into one of these situations. And I mean, I think Suzanne's been very fortunate to have a lot of that support, but she's really become involved in it, and she's really made it her goal to try and help other people that have to go through this, because she's a poster girl for it. So we're also pleased that she's gotten to this point, because honestly, we didn't think she was going to make it. We really didn't, and we're so thankful that she is where she is today. I mean, it's fabulous.
Guillain-Barré is unusual because while some people have a mild form, Mrs. Jennings had a severe form and was really very disabled. And then to have the experience of recovering and regaining, for her, I know she really reevaluated what friendships, relationships, what her purpose in life.
Suzanne, in many ways, has not changed, but what this has done is made her much more introspective. I believe that once it set in what this was all about and what it meant, she started to understand a little bit more about what's most important in life. Rather than just always chasing the almighty dollar as we do, she started to understand that how she could be a help to other people. And I would say she always was kind to other people, and she was always a mentor in her business. But now she's even more helping other people who are going through GBS and going through these things. And I think that's a much bigger part of her life than it ever was.
First thing I tell anybody I meet that has GBS is have faith. You will get better, but you have to have patience, because GBS stands for getting better slowly. It takes a while. What's my wish? My wish, Suzanne. You know what my wish is? To just keep on keeping on. That's it.
Best thing you can do. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Susan. Everybody. Happy birthday to you. That's great.
Let me tell you something. When she had GBS, she couldn't have done that.
Really?
She didn't have any breath.
Oh.
Just a little sidelight.
Okay, we can disassemble people. There you go.
Okay, we're all finished now. You can put the light back.
You can all.
It's good.
Actually, why don't we put it at the top like that? Won't be bad.